Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today, one of those great strategy games was released, Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. And so this game is perfect for a tutorial. Uh, it's really going to be aimed at the person who is familiar with hex and counter games, has maybe played war games in the past, but maybe hasn't gotten into the Grigsby games thinking they're too complex, they take too much time to learn, too many rules. We're going to try to break down all those barriers so that you can enjoy this fantastic game. Also, I'm going to try to do this in 30 to 40-minute chunks so that even the intermediate to advanced player can go to the section they're interested in, maybe pick up a tip here or there, or think about something that they hadn't thought about before. That is the goal anyway. And so thank you for dropping by. And let's get right into it. I'm on the start screen and we're going to build this thing up from the ground floor. That's how I like to learn, and that's how I like to do tutorials here on the channel, which is really start right at the beginning. And so that way you feel like you're starting to get into it, you're starting to understand it a little bit each episode, and you can get your arms all the way around it before we get into the deep specifics of each different topic. So we're on the start screen here, and as you can see, it's a very simple one. Uh, right here at the top left, you can pick who's going to play the Axis. Well, in this case, it's a human. That's me. You can also pick who is going to play the Soviets. In this case, it's the computer. Now, of course, you can play against another human being. There's nothing better than playing against another human in this game so that you get the unexpected. The AI is actually, well, I can't speak to the AI here in War in the East 2 yet. I expect it to be very good. The AI in War in the East 1, in War in the West, and in War in the Pacific, the other Grigsby games, is quite formidable. So I would expect nothing less here. And so we're going to have the computer play the Soviets, but you could play a human. You can do that by email. You can also do that online on the Slitherine website. So you sign up for their website and you guys can trade turns back and forth online. I've never actually done that, but it sounds somewhat intriguing. Maybe I will. Difficulty level, normal. Now there are 5 different levels, and you see them here, ranging everywhere from easy to normal, challenging, hard, and impossible. Make the impossible possible. We are going to be on normal for the tutorial. Game options. Now, game options in this game, as you may suspect, do have quite a bit of impact on gameplay. And so some people gloss over these. I think it's important to understand what they are so you can get the best gameplay experience for what you're looking for. And so the first one's pretty self-explanatory. Who's controlling whom? Who's on first? We are controlling the Germans, or the Axis, if you prefer. The computer's controlling the Soviets. Fog of war. If you played a war game, you get it. You know what fog of war, general fog of war is. You actually have to run recon in this game. You get detection levels and you get to know more and more about the units. When you have a unit that gets next to an enemy unit, you get more detection. The recon missions in the air war are very important to figure out what's out there. So it's traditional fog of war. You don't know anything more than, let's say, a general on the ground in real life would know. Movement fog of war is a little bit different than what you see maybe in many war games. Movement fog of war extends that fog of war to say, hey, this is an I go, you go game. So the Axis moves first generally in the Grand Campaign they do, and in most of the scenarios they do as well. And so you get to move all of your units before the Soviets get to move all of their units. Well, because of that, you can move into their territory. And if you didn't have this movement fog of war, you would find out more information that maybe you're quote unquote entitled to. And so what movement fog of war does is it cuts off what you know sort of at the first Soviet hex. And I'm talking about on the ground here. And then as you move into Soviet territory, each hex, as you go along, things may pop up. You may find new things. That's movement fog of war in an I go, you go sort of game. Lock headquarters support. Now, that's kind of an advanced topic to hit you with right at the start. Basically, this game is played at the divisional level, and so the vast majority of counters that you see on the map will be divisions. Okay, those divisions will have core headquarters. So a core headquarters will generally command 2 to 4 divisions. All right. That core headquarters then is commanded by an army headquarters, and an army headquarters, generally speaking, commands 2 to 4 core headquarters. The army headquarters is then further commanded by the army group headquarters. And if you're familiar at all with the Eastern Front of the War, for the Axis, there is Army Group North, Army Group Center, and Army Group South. There is also the Axis's allies, and they have high commands. They have armies, they have corps. It works the same way for them. So you may say, well, what does this all have to do with lock headquarters support? Well, because this game is played at the divisional level, there are units that are smaller than divisions, battalions, regiments, companies, brigades, generally speaking, or are the units in this game that are smaller than a division. Well, how do you represent them? If you put them all on the map, you wouldn't be able to see the map at all. There's just too many of them. The sheer uh, number of units in this game would be completely overwhelming. It's already whelming. That would be overwhelming. And so what did the developers do to deal with that? They decided they would not represent them on the map themselves, these smaller than division units. Instead, what they generally do is attach to headquarters, and then those headquarters can send them out to divisions to help with specific battles, to do other tasks. So there are construction units, for instance, that are not at a division level of strength, and they can be attached to headquarters and go out and do their specific missions and not have to be represented on the map. But we'll get much further into that when I'm going to do a whole episode on support units. For now, it's enough to know we are not going to lock them because one of, I think, the great things about this game is the flexibility it gives you to move those support units around, use them where you think they are important or should be used. And if you lock them, you just kind of lock them in and they are where they are. There's no flexibility. And so I'm going to show you in the support units video exactly how to use them, how to move them around, how to make them the most effective they can be. Okay? Automate AI error assist. Now, this is a new thing in War in the East too. It replicates in some ways War in the West, which was a Grigsby game that came out after the original War in the East. And the air war in this game has changed from the original game and changed quite substantially. And so they've added this feature in here because they realize if you're playing an Eastern Front game, you're interested, or many people are anyway, interested in the ground combat and maybe not as interested in the air war. But maybe you are. Maybe you're very interested in the air war. This gives you flexibility, that word again, to either have the AI help you with the air war, and I definitely or not, and I definitely would suggest the first 4, 5, 6 times you play, you leave this on. Now that doesn't mean you're not going to have any control. Even when you turn it all over to the AI, you do have some things that you have to control in the air war. It's very minimal, but also with this on, you can go in and change things manually. So to the extent that you do want to do things manually, you can do that even if this box is checked, okay? But this just sets it up where the AI will be helping you with the air war to the extent you want it to. Okay? Enhanced player TB control. What does this mean? Well, TB means theater box. A theater box, the developers had a hurdle to jump over in the fact that there is an entire world war going on, right? Now, the Eastern Front of World War II is the largest land battle, the largest battle between humans in history. But that being said, there was a war going on in North Africa. There was a war going on in Sicily, Italy, Western Europe. We could keep going on and on. But the point is, there were other theaters to the war. Well, how do you model that and how does that work? What they wanted to do is give you the ability to move units from the Western European theater to the Eastern theater if you wanted to, or vice versa if you wanted to. And so these theater boxes, again, I will be doing an episode about the theater boxes and how they work and how you can manage those. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but the point is the other theaters of World War II are represented in sort of an abstract way, and how you deal with those will actually affect your war on the Eastern, or your theater, I should say, on the Eastern Front. So we are going to leave this unchecked so that we can actually get that enhanced control. If you check it, the computer, the AI, will do a lot of that for you. So early on, when you're first playing, you may want to go ahead and check this box. Let the AI do it until you get a feel for it. But for the tutorial, I want to go over it with you of how you would move these things around. So I'm going to leave it unchecked. All right, general difficulty level. You have 5 different items down here. You've got morale level, fort build level, logistics level, transport level, and admin level. Okay. We're not going to spend a lot of time going into each one in depth. I will tell you that when it comes to ground combat, morale is the most important factor. All other things being equal, morale really sets units apart, okay, as far as how effective they'll be in ground combat. And so, 2 units that have the same supply, they have enough bullets and they have enough food, morale really has an effect on ground combat. Fort build level. Now, fort building, you may say, what? You have guys out there laying stone and, building this beautiful fort? No, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. Each unit in the game has a construction value. And so when a counter is in a hex at the end of a turn, it will naturally start building fortifications in that hex. Okay, this game is weekly turns, so every turn is 1 week. And because of that, if a unit is in a hex for a week, they may be doing all sorts of things, having a good time, kicking the soccer ball around, football for you Europeans around. But they're also going to be building fortifications, man-made fortifications. And so every hex has a base fort level, but as a counter stays in a hex for each turn that it does that, it will also be building up the fort level. Okay, that's what that is. Logistics level kind of speaks for itself. That's how fast and how efficiently uh, food, bullets, fuel, supply get around the map. Transport level, how you can transport, whether it be those supplies, fuel, logistics type stuff, or troops. And admin level is just how well your generals are administering all of that. Hey, that's why it's called administrative level. What does that have to do with difficulty level? Well, on normal, both the Soviets and the Axis are set at their base level, 100, what they would be naturally. Now, that does not mean that every unit in the game has a 100 morale. What it means is if that unit would naturally have an 80 morale, it has an 80 morale. But let's say we kick it up to challenging. Now, they don't change the Axis morale level, but they give the Soviets a 10% bonus. So if the Soviet unit generally had would, usually have an 80% or 80 morale score. Now they have an 88 morale score. It just takes it by 110%. All right. Same with fort levels. They will build up faster on the Soviet side. Their logistics will be increased, transport. So down here on 90, if naturally we would build one fort level, let's just say that in a turn. In this case, we'll only build zero point 0.9 of a fort level. Okay. And you get the idea. So on the previous screen, we selected normal, all right, and that this normal, this just shows you the breakdown of the effect it will have on the game. Reset to default, I'll let you figure that one out. You get it. Preferences, these are all personal flavor for the most part. It's how you display the game, Windows or full screen. You can up or down the graphic quality depending on your rig, scroll speed, message delay, hex pop-up delay. I don't know. You can copy these. These work for me. I'm used to playing the game this way. I will tell you this out of these combat resolution message level, this is how much detail you're going to get when there is a combat. If you put this on 7, which is the maximum, so it goes from 1 to 7, if you put it on 7, it's going to take you 3 to 4 years to play this game. 7 will pretty much get into every firing volley that goes back and forth. So I find that 2 is perfect for me, but I've been playing the game, well, the previous game for quite some time. I've been playing this one for about 2 days, so who knows? No, I've tested this, and 2 is good for me in this game. Again, as a beginning player, you may want to set it on 3, just to get a little more detail and get a feel of how the combat goes back and forth. All right. Combat resolution message delay. When the combat report comes up, it's kind of how much delay there is before that comes up. Again, it's the kind of thing that's going to be trial and error. You can change all of this during the game. So if you don't like what you're seeing, you can change it. Error execution phase detail. We'll get into the different phases. I have this on high for now. Partially that's because this is a new air system and I'm trying to figure out as much of it as I can. And so I want to see as much as I can. Kind of the same I was telling you with combat. When you're new, you want to see more, right? Jump map, ground element aircraft. I've got all of this stuff on. I think this one's very important to make sure the Army font colors are on. That way you can tell the differences between your units, what armies they are in very quickly. Show move path and show allowed movement, also important, I think, to have those on, especially when you first start playing the game. All of this stuff, that's again personal preference. Non-NATO symbols, I wouldn't do that. I'm used to the NATO symbols. If you played war games, you probably are too. Unit values displayed. Now you could have the name of the unit on the counter. I prefer to have numerals on there because the unit counter info, you should really have this set to CV and move. What does that mean? CV is a raw combat value for that unit. It's an approximation of how strong that unit is on the attack. Now, units have two different combat values, on the attack and on the defensive. And so raw CV is how, all other things being equal, how strong on the attack this unit would be. Now, again, it's not perfect, it's rough. And when you see the Soviets, that has fog of war in it. So you really don't know what they are. But for your own units, you get a nice rough approximation of how strong they are. Now, that will all be affected by their morale, their experience, the terrain, how much they've already moved that turn. There's a lot of things that go in. I always call it the witch's brew. There's a lot of things that go into that pot. They stir them around and they come out with an adjusted combat value. But on your counter, you'll see the raw combat value. That's what that is. Then you'll see how many movement points that counter has left. And so infantry units, usually at the start of the game, with full supply, full combat prep points, which we'll get into, uh, all ready to go, brand spanking new. Infantry units have 16 movement points per turn, Motorized units have 50. So motorized units can move approximately 3 times as far as ground or infantry units, I should say. Uh, as the game goes on and things start to happen to that unit, maybe they didn't get enough fuel this time, maybe their general didn't pass some of his checks, maybe they've been in and around difficult terrain, so on and so forth, they will get fewer movement points at the start of the turn, but it's all kind of dependent on how well you're supplying them and other factors. So you always want to see exactly how many movement points you have. And every type of terrain has a different cost of movement points to move across it. And it also matters whether you're moving through an Axis controlled hex or a Soviet controlled hex. There are different costs for all of that, but that's all wrapped up into movement points. And with that, we will continue. Okay, so that was preferences. Pick scenario here. The base game shipped with the 1941 campaign. Or you could play Stalingrad to Berlin, which really starts with the encirclement around Stalingrad. The Soviets actually go first in that one, and they start to surround and encircle the Sixth Army at Stalingrad. So what this campaign really is the Axis on the defensive. The 41 campaign starts off with the Axis completely on the offensive. The Stalingrad to Berlin is with the Axis starting where they would be right up to the point of being on the offensive, and now they're on the defensive. And so you can play a full campaign with the Soviets actually being on the offensive. Then you have some smaller ones here. They have the introductory scenarios. Now, when I show you things in this, I'm not sure. I may jump around a little bit to different ones that best show whatever I'm talking about that episode. Okay. Let's go back for just a second before we do that. I mentioned you can play by email. I'll leave that up to you. I'm not going to go through exactly how you set up the file and send it to somebody and whatnot, but you can play this by email. You can play it on the Slitherine servers, okay? Load save game, speaks for itself. Multiplayer, okay, we're not going to go into that. Let's just pick a scenario then, um, and we'll pick their introductory scenario. Now, this is going to have the Soviets go first, so we'll get to watch some action here right off the front. And as you see, you have different save game folders in this one. And this is a very, very small slice of the map. And right now, the Soviets are executing their air phase. Like I said, we will get in anything that I mention here, I will get into. And if I don't, it's completely my own fault by omission. I'm going to try to get into everything that I mention here. So the Soviets did their air phase. Now they're doing their ground phase. All right. We have no control over this, obviously. The Soviets are the AI. Um, but this will soon pop up as soon as their ground phase is over. Phase one on our side is the logistics phase. You have no control over this. Now, when you play the grand campaign as the Axis, you don't have that phase in turn one. Every turn after that you do, but obviously, the logistics are what they are on the morning of June 22nd, 1941, so there's no logistics phase. But here there is, because the Soviets went first. Now our logistics phase happened, meaning the AI is trying to supply our units, fuel our units, get bullets out to our units. We'll get into it all, but that's what was going on there. That is phase one of every turn, your logistics phase. Phase two is the air planning phase. Okay, so you don't immediately jump in here and just start moving your ground units. You have to plan what you do in the air first. And I will be doing a couple of episodes all about the air war. So we're not necessarily going to do this here because I just want to show you the user interface, talk about what each thing is, and then in future episodes, I'll go into depth about each one of these phases, how you control them, what you need to be doing with them. So here is the main screen. The first thing to pay attention to is we have a new event over here. So this is new in Warn the East 2. There are news events, okay? And we click on that, and these seem to come up pretty regularly from my play so far. They're kind of a neat addition to it. It gives you some history. It can affect the game. So you may get a message say on, the turn of June, the first week of June 1944, saying the Allies have landed at Normandy, and all of a sudden you will lose units out to the Western Europe front if that's controlled by the AI. Now, if you're controlling your theater boxes, maybe that's not true, but these could have effects on the game, and we may see one right here. Soviet partisans. Okay. Well, we have one here on turn one. Let's just read it very quickly here. Occupied by the Germans since August of 41, the city of Veliki Luki has great strategic value due to the main north-south railway, so on and so forth. The point being is they tell you your exact situation when you load in here. That's turn one. News. Turn two news. Soviet partisans. Partisans become active throughout much of the Axis occupied territory of the Soviet Union. Partisan attacks, intensity 1 or 2 in many USSR regions. Now that partisans is also new to this game in a sense. Now, in the first game, there were partisans, but they would show up on the map as a unit counter and they would go try to cut your rail lines. In this game, it is more abstracted. The Soviets actually have to allocate resources. They have a theater box, essentially, that's all about partisans. And so, someday when I cover how to play the Soviets, we will get in deep on that. Okay, so you have your news over here. Here you have what is called a turn summary. This is a new screen, and I really like it. It gives you a lot of information. This button up here is reinforcements and withdrawals. And so you can go to this screen, and it will tell you what reinforcements you have coming in here. All right, what they're made up of. So you are going to get a reinforcement in turn two, which is this turn because the Soviets were the only ones that played in turn one. Now it's turn two. It's on the Axis side. 8th Panzer Division is showing up. It's armored, 9771 men, 106 guns, 25 armored fighting vehicles. It arrived. Yes, it did. Okay, it's arrived. It's just telling you that it's here on the map now and what hex it's in. Okay, and then very quickly you can see here how many new units you got on the ground and how many new units you got in the air this turn. All right, so again, this is reinforcements and transfers. Now, sometime you'll lose some, right? If the AI is controlling it, it'll have to move something to a different theater box, but you would also see it on that screen. You can see friendly losses. You can see the order of battle changes here. All right. You can see logistics information, combat unit alerts. This is very helpful. One of the important things in this game is to keep your, I say very important, it is maybe the most important thing, is to keep your units in supply. And then you also want to see if anything is under strength because you may want to put it in reserve. You may want to have it get replacements. We'll get into all that, but it's very nice here to get a summary of what's happening. So under strength, we have 7 units that are under strength now. We actually have 2 that are negative or under 10% strength, so they're what's considered depleted. All right. And then over here, you see the supply ones. Low supply, we have 2. Critical supply, under 50%, 0. Isolated, this is kind of one of the worst things you could be. That's 3. And then you can see some score here. We'll get into victory points and whatnot. But for now, let's just play the game, right? So that's your turn summary. Down here to the left, you have a jump map. So you can get all around the map. You can even go see theater boxes. Now, for this scenario, you can't see these other ones. They are grayed out because for this smaller scale scenario, they just don't matter. They don't. The developer said, why program all of these theater boxes in here? This is a few turn small scenarios, so they just grade them out. You do have a reserve box here, though. So Axis reserves, and it's the same in the Grand Campaign. These would all be lit up, and you could go see Western Europe, Norway, Finland, okay, and so on and so forth, Italy, the Balkans, so on and so forth. But here we can click on reserves and you can see what this looks like. You can see the status of it, what the arrival hex would be for these reserves. Then you can go see actually the units. You have 2 mortar units that are in reserve, all right? And you can see air units. Now, when they're in pink, it means they're locked. They cannot move out of the box, at least on this turn. Now, I would guess they didn't put them here just to look pretty. They will eventually unlock during this scenario, but they just haven't yet. So they're locked here for now when they're in pink. When they're in this kind of gray, they are not. And you could put them down, you can bring them down on the map. Now, these are support units, so you would put them in a unit, but that's a little bit beyond where we are right now. Then you can just click back down here, get rid of that box. Okay, so that's the jump map and the theater boxes right here. All right, there are 3 tabs at the top that are I was looking at air planning, I said planning. There are 3 tabs at the top that will flip you to different choices down here on the icon bars. All right, and then here it tells you what phase you're in. We're in the air planning phase. That is phase 2. Phase 1 was logistics. Air planning is 2. All right, so we're in that phase because we don't have anything we can do in the logistics phase. We've that is based on what we've done on previous turns. In a small scenario like this, of course, that was, it was what it was essentially. So we jump right to the air planning phase here. Admin, I'm going to do these backwards because we kind of go from least important to most important. Admin, you can save your game. You can go look at the hotkeys. Now, let's just click on that. You can see every hotkey in this game. I don't know if you're a hotkey user, and I don't know what that says about you psychologically, whether you are or you're not. I use them sometimes. I don't use them other times. I don't know. I've been playing these games so long that I kind of do things and I don't even know why I do them anymore. But if you ever want to know what the hotkeys are, they are right up here in this admin tab. You can also see they did something new in this. You can see the hotkey actually on the buttons. And so get this, the hotkey is H. So if you just hit H, I'm going to do it. No, it was find hex. If you do it right, if you do hit this here, wait a minute, hold on, let's go back. Show help locate city. Oh, that's just because I think I'm going cross-eyed here. I think I'm going cross-eyed. It is actually Shift H. Okay, got it. So Shift H is hotkey, and there it comes up. All right. But you can see what the letter on the keyboard is to do that. You can go to your game options again. Now, if you're playing another human, you really can't change things around. If you're playing the AI, a few of those you can change. Preferences, back to the preferences screen, and then exit out, get out of the game. Okay, so that's up here. Kind of forget about the second bar here for now. These tabs are just going to deal with this bar right here. Info screens, all right. Now we have some choices here. You have order of battle. This will give you a general representation of kind of the big overview picture, how many on-map forces there are, guns, armored vehicles, and planes for Germany, the Axis allies, and the Soviet Union. You can go over here and see your order of battle. OKH is the supreme headquarters for the Germans, and then right below them is Army Group Center under Gunther von Klug, who is the field marshal there. Then one step below that, 3rd Panzer Army underneath Reinhardt. One step below that, you see the corps out here, And if you go below that, you can see the actual divisions in the corps. And so you can see your entire order of battle here, what they've got, what they're made up of, who's commanding them. It's very helpful. Losses. This will tell you, and it will break down ground losses into what you have lost. And so we have lost 81, the 81 millimeter mortar. We lost 20 of them when the Soviets attacked during their turn. And so you can go through here and see everything you've lost. This is more of a big picture summary. How many men, how many guns, how many armored fighting vehicles, how many have been killed, captured, disabled. You can see that for Axis and for Soviets. Again, this gives you the individual representation. Air losses, exact same idea, and it also gives you a general summary over here, but this will tell you individual aircraft that have been destroyed, and you can see completely destroyed units here. The Izidra Air Base was completely destroyed. All right, so that you can know that if you want to. Production. Now, in this game, you do not have control over production. All right, it's abstracted. Now, if you go take Soviet towns, or as the Soviets take German towns that do production, it will hurt your production, obviously, right? There are factories in those towns. The production system is actually really extensive. You just don't manually control it. You're not saying build, uh, you know, Panzer threes, build the chassis for those at this town. The game does all of that, puts it together and sends you, a Panzer III. So you don't actually control that. And so I don't go there a whole lot. Metrics, this will show you anything you want. You can filter it, total victory points, total men that you have, in your army, total guns, so on and so forth. Now, this is just for this scenario. It's not the overall, right? In the entire war, of course, but you can do it by theater, box, in transfer, on the map. You can go through and you can see how many enemy guns lost were victory points for you. You can go down here to air power, anything and everything that you want to see. You can get a visual representation of it. Weather. Weather is actually quite important in this game. Now you see the very small box here that we're playing in. They've drawn a little larger box for the weather area, I assume. This is actually a low pressure front. A low pressure front, I'm no meteorologist, but evidently can cause rain. And so you will see these fronts move across the map. You can also see in this game, you have weather on the ground, weather in the air. It could be cloudy up in the air, but be nice, clear terrain, meaning it hasn't rained, it's not muddy, it's not snowy on the ground. And so you kind of have two levels of weather systems here. You've got in the air, is it too cloudy to bomb? Or on the ground, is it too muddy to fight? You can also look at the climate zones if we wanted to do that in the Soviet Union and elsewhere. You can look at the road system if you want to. So it's got a lot of information on there. This is your reinforcement screen again. So we saw that on the turn summary. Usually in this game, you can find information in 2 or 3 different places. So we can see, here's the ground summary. Now, there's usually tabs. Always go up here and look and see if you see tabs. There will be air groups coming in. AOGs, we're not going to get into that. That is not a politician from New York. That is an air operational group. AOG. And so we're not going to deal with that right now. I just want to point out to you that you can go see if any are arriving or being transferred in or out for that matter. Then right here we have the commander's report. Now there is a lot of information on the commander's report. I was about to say, I'm not going to go deep into this. I would just like to point out to you that you can pretty much find anything about any unit you want in this game. One way or another. There's all kinds of filters. It will tell you who the headquarters is, what theater box they're in. In this case, these are all on the map. The distance from their headquarters, how much fatigue, and you can sort, you can filter, you can do whatever you want to do here, really, with information. It is a spreadsheet lover's dream. If I have any accountants watching this, you're in some kind of nirvana, but you really can find anything you want here for units, headquarters, air, leaders, battles, locations, equipment, so on, so forth. Then there's a different air tab here. We will get into all that, probably spend half of an episode on that. Logistics phase report. This is going to mean nothing to you right now, but this will show you everything you need to know about your freight that's moving out there that turns it later into fuel, bullets, or food. You can find it here as we get into logistics. Air directives. We will get into that in the air directives or the air portion of this tutorial. This is the air directive summary. This is the air doctrine screen. This is more like a big general, what are your doctrine or what is your doctrine? This is your kind of more individual orders that you put out there. Then the AI generally does the individual missions, unless you really want to do this thing completely manually. Um, Here we have theater. We can go to the theater boxes. All right, so we could click on that. Now we don't have any, we just have the reserve, but you don't have to do it from the jump box. You can do it from here. We have victory screen. So this will show you your victory points if that's was confusing. We have Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia, if you ever want to know more about 18th Army, let's say, you can click on here. It will tell you all about 18th Army and have hyperlinks to more information. It truly is Wikipedia for, so many things in this game. So you can always go up here if you want to know more historical information or just look and say, well, hey, which army should this be division be with? If there's a division out there that doesn't have a command or something like that, maybe interesting to go look and see what it was historically. You do have the announcements. You can come right up here. So that breaking news, you can come up here and click. And get the same thing. So if once we click off the newspaper and read it, it's gone. You can come up here on the info screens. So all of these info screens are really your databases, your information. They're things to help you as a player. Admin is really what it says it is. It is, saving games and looking at what the hotkey list is, stuff like that. Info are your databases and information that help you as a player. Turn summary, that is what we saw and we got out of when we first started. That's there. Then we go on to map info, but I think I'm going to leave this episode right here for now. When we come back next time, we will go to map info and we'll actually go look around the map and we'll look and see what all of these different boxes that you can toggle on and off, what they'll show you on the map, what it means, why it's important. We'll do all of that next time. So thank you so much for joining me. This has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. This was part one. We got a few parts to go, but I'm going to really try to build this up from the ground floor and build it piece by piece until you understand this great game and you can go play it and feel like you know what you're doing. So anyway, again, Strategy Gaming Dojo, thank you so much. I'll talk to you next time.